Welcome to Level Up Tribes. Level Up Tribes provides resources to help you attain the necessary resources to level up your mind, body, and soul and realize your full potential. It is about exploring, learning, providing you with the tools from the experts for you to create a better version of yourself. I am your host, Agnes Goodwine, and welcome, Tribes. Between the restrictions of COVID-19 pandemic, witnessing police brutality, to protests and riots demanding social justice for human rights, people are angry, uncertain, scared, and grieving. But what can we do? How can we make a difference in our own lives and in the world? Douglas Noll, author of De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less, offers expertise, guidance, and so much needed answers on how we can begin to move forward together and become key players in the proven process to peacemaking. Thank you for being here with me at Level Up Tribes podcast. Love the book. I have so many questions. Like, I have notes. I just don't know where to begin.
Well, let's get into it.
Tell us about yourself, about your story, your background. Before we dive deep into the book, which is called De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less, which is great to know these type of skills and tools now because considering
it's chaos.
Yes. So yes, take it away.
My short history is that I grew up in Southern California and went back east to Dartmouth College, graduated from Dartmouth as an English literature major, came back out to California, taught skiing for a year, then went to law school at McGeorge School of Law, graduated from law school in 1977 and passed the bar and became a lawyer. I moved down to Central California in basically the Fresno area and became a trial lawyer and tried cases, civil trial cases, primarily complex financial problems, a lot, of course, involving agriculture, for about 22 years. And then through things that happened to me that I won't bore you or your audience with, I decided to go back to school in the late 1990s and earn my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies. And I was trained by the Mennonites, who had their West Coast Mennonite University is Fresno Pacific University in Fresno. And I was trained to be a peacemaker. And that was one of the most amazing 3 years of my life. And I realized that the limitations of the law for solving human conflict. So I left the very successful law practice in 2000 to become a mediator and peacemaker. And for the next 10 years, that's what I did. I wrote and taught and mediated and was a peacemaker and a consultant. And then in 2010, a colleague of mine, Laurel Coffer, who was a mediator in Los Angeles, called me up one day and read me a letter from a woman who was serving a life sentence without possibility of parole in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, which was about an hour and 15 minutes from where I live. And basically, this woman was asking if Laurel would come in and teach the lifers in the prison how to become mediators and peacemakers because they were tired of the violence. So Laurel and I talked about this, and I said, yeah, I think we should do this. And so it took us 6 months to get permission to come into the prison. And we started the Prison of Peace Project in March of 2010, teaching 17 women, ages 28 to 65, of all different ethnic types and ages and professions and really a diverse group, how to be mediators. And today, that's how it started. And then today, we are now in 15 California prisons, a prison in Connecticut, 15 prisons in Greece, and we're starting a program in Nairobi, Kenya, and also in Italy.
Wow.
Unbelievable. So as a result of the work, I had discovered a really powerful de-escalation technique in a mediation in 2004. And this became the foundational skill that we taught our inmates. And we've taught over 20,000 inmates how to be peacemakers and mediators. I mean globally, our organization. Yeah. Because we have both outside trainers that we've trained, lawyers mostly, and also inside trainers. Our structure is to build sustainability within each prison so that we're there for 3 years. We train up a cadre of trainers who are all lifers and long-termers, and then they carry on the project after we leave. So we've trained many, many thousands of inmates. And after a few years, the inmates started asking for a book that they could give to their families could read. And so finally I said, okay, I'll do that. And I talked to my agent and I wrote a manuscript in the summer of 2016, and we sold it on the second try to Simon & Schuster.
Yeah.
And then I turned the manuscript in November of 2016. We didn't expect it to come out for 18 months.
Right.
But of course, that was 4 years ago, the election between Clinton and Trump, and things were just as crazy then, probably. Yeah, they were just as crazy then as they are now, as we sit here waiting for the election results. And the funny thing is, just a funny story, is that in February of 2017, my agent called me and said, "You're not going to believe this, but the president of Atria Books, which is one of the parts of Simon & Schuster, called, and she apparently read the manuscript. And typically she would not read a whole manuscript. She just looks through the manuscript to see what's coming down the pipe, but she read your manuscript, cleared her desk for the rest of the day to read the whole book, then made the call and said, how fast can we get this book out? And they literally got that book out in September of 2017, one of the fastest turnarounds for a big publishing house of ever getting the book out. It was pretty fun. Wow. And the book's done really well. It's in its second printing. It's in 4 languages. It's done very well.
It's in Spanish too?
It is not in Spanish, kind of amazing. It's in English. See if I can remember. It's in English, German, Chinese, and Arabic.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yes. Yeah. So, get the Spanish one out soon.
Yeah, I'd love to get this. I mean, it comes down to a publisher either in Spain or in a Latin American country deciding that they want to pick it up. And so if anybody knows a publisher who's a Latinx, have them contact me or my agent, and we'll forward it on to the publisher. So it's been really fun. And then as a result of the book and of course the prison project, I put together a lot of trainings and taught thousands of people outside of prison how to use these skills. And today, what I've learned, we can get into this more, but what I've learned is that this book and my skills are not just about de-escalating angry people. It's about a way of life, and it's about listening other people into existence. And I've come to realize that these skills are just about how we should be relating to each other. And the problem we have that I'm finding out is that there are many people who either do not want to understand the power of emotions or are afraid of emotions because our Western culture is so biased against emotional competency. We give privilege of rationality over emotionality when in fact we're 98% emotional and only 2% rational.
Yes.
So my mission today is to teach people how to be emotionally competent.
In the book, you did amazing. And we'll get into that a little bit, but to go back to the prison of peace, that part of you just touched my heart.
Oh, well, thank you.
It really did. And because you did business and commercial legal work for 22 years, and I know you said that you didn't really want to go deep into what shifted and what pivoted this business.
I'm happy to talk about it if you want to.
Yes, yes, I am, because I don't know if that was like a spiritual moment for you or
it was over time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, let's talk about it.
Here's the story. I'm happy to tell the story. I just don't want to get into my stuff too much if there are other things you want to talk about, but I'm happy to go there. So
let's go there.
It was mid 1980s. I was in my mid 30s. I'm dating myself now. I just turned 70. I was at that time, outside the practice of law, I was a ski instructor and a professional skier, and I was really trying to get to my highest level of certification as a ski instructor, and it's a very difficult 3-day exam. And as a part-time ski instructor, it was just really hard for me to get the time in to develop my skiing skills to the level that was required to pass this exam. But I'm like you put a red flag in front of me, wave it in front of me, I'm like a bull, Don't tell me I can't do something. So I decided, this is before cross-training was a big deal, and I decided, well, maybe the martial arts would help me, give me the strength and agility and speed and balance that I need to pass this exam. And I said, and being a trial lawyer, having that kind of mental discipline isn't going to hurt me either. So I decided, I got into the martial arts, and I just happened to choose a place that was not too far from my office at the time, which was a Northern Chinese animal style. And, the motto there was, we break bones, not boards. And it was all vicious street fighting. And I was really bad. So I signed up and I started taking, and I was horrible at it. But then finally I got good at it. And that's the way, it's always been my whole life. I really had to struggle to learn until finally it clicks. And then I became a world-class expert. Mm-hmm. And same thing with martial arts. I didn't expect anything different. I knew this was going to be a slog. But by the time I was 40, I was awarded my first degree black belt, and I was awarded my secondary black belt a year later. And at that time, a teacher called me in and said, "You're done here. You're too arrogant. You're dangerous. I've trained you to be dangerous. You are full of yourself. This is all true. I was an arrogant asshole. And he said, you've got to go out and learn Tai Chi. Don't come back until you master Tai Chi. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but that was a death sentence for martial arts, because you never master Tai Chi. But I took on Tai. Everybody knows what Tai Chi is. It's, you know, you've seen the documentaries of the old Asian people in the park doing this very slow movements. Those are katas. And I approach Tai Chi not as like you might approach yoga, some sort of contemplative exercise. I approached it as a martial art. And so I began to study Tai Chi as a martial art. And there are a couple of things I learned. First of all, Tai Chi is the origin of all martial arts. All martial arts come from Tai Chi. Second, it is one of the most vicious forms of martial arts you can possibly imagine when you study it as a martial art and not as just a form of exercise. But Tai Chi has two really interesting paradoxes. And this is part of where the shift came. The first is, the softer you are, the stronger you are. And the second is, the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Now, I'm a big guy, and I'm 6'1", right, 217 pounds. In those days, I was in peak physical condition. To me, a fair fight was 5 guys with knives and me unarmed. That was a fair fight. So this idea of being soft to be strong and vulnerable to be powerful, and then I was a hardcore trial lawyer. I mean, this did not compute. But I continued to practice Tai Chi and had some good teachers, and slowly started to understand what Tai Chi was all about, until finally one day, I think it was 97 or 98, I was in a courtroom trying a case, and the thought came to me, what the hell am I doing in here? And after that trial, I took off I had a scheduled vacation, a river trip up in Idaho. And so I did whitewater for 10 days. I've been a whitewater kayaker and rafter all my adult life. So this was with a group of friends. We got a permit and ran the river. And I spent the week on the river all by myself in my raft, just thinking about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer for the past 20 plus years. And at the end of the week, I concluded I'd only really helped about 5 people.
Wow.
And what I said to myself was, you know, I don't want to go another 20 or 30 years at this. And at the end of my career, say, I've only really, truly helped 15 people. That just doesn't resonate with me. Yeah, it's a great living. It's a hard way to make a living being a trial lawyer. It's intensely difficult work. It didn't resonate with me anymore. So when the trip was over with, I came back to town. I live up in the mountains, 30, 40 miles from Fresno. And I was driving down out of the mountains to my office, and I heard the one and only public service announcement on our local public radio station for a new degree in peacemaking and peacemaking and conflict studies at Fresno Pacific. And I made a note of the number and called and got the orientation date. And I just said, I'm going to go check this out. And I said, I was a little put off by the fact that, you know, obviously it's a Protestant Christian church and the Mennonites. And I was a little put off by their kind of overt religiosity, because that's not my thing. Yeah. But I decided, what the heck, this is going to be good for me. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Yeah. And so I enrolled, and I was the first lawyer to ever enroll in the program. And ultimately we set up a joint degree program. I'm the chairman of the board of trustees of our local law school. And we set up a joint degree program between the law school and Fresno Pacific, so that you could become a lawyer peacemaker, just like me. You could get your law degree and your MA in peacemaking in 5 years. And we've had some students take that and work with it. So that led me to proposing to the law firm, my partners, you know, a different way of approaching the practice of the law. And they wouldn't have, the people in charge didn't want anything to do with that. Even though I was the second largest moneymaker in the firm, part of what I think scared them was that I might not make as much money for them as I would make as a peacemaker. So I left in 2000 and started my own private practice, which I've been doing ever since. So that's how
I love that story. I love the story. It was like divine intervention for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Every day.
I love it. Yes. So yes, let's dive deep into the book. But I want to break it down, because there's just so much that you have in this book. Something that stood out to me in the book was the 5 powerful transformations. It's great for journaling too. I mean, you can break this down even deeper, you know, just for self-awareness in regards to what triggers you. If I'm a child of trauma and I've spent a long time trying to figure out, why was I so angry?
Yes.
or sensitive, or what are these emotions? And a lot of the things that I have worked through in the past 15, 20 years, you speak about in the book. So can you guide us through this 5 powerful transformations?
The first insight, and this is the insight that every human being has to make at some point in time, in my opinion, is that we are 98% emotional and 2% rational. Aristotle, Plato, Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, the Enlightenment people, all wrong. Every philosopher, most every philosopher has written over thousands of years that what makes humans different from other animals is rationality. Turns out that's absolutely false. We are emotional beings. And in fact, we're the only species that have emotions. Other animals have affect. We have affect too, but we also have emotions. And once we realize that we have very limited rationality, even economists today are talking about bounded rationality, how our rational capacity is extremely limited. I mean, for example, you can't even begin to be rational unless you're emotional first. Because how would you know to use rational thinking unless you had an emotional reaction to a stimulus that told you, I got to do some problem solving here? It's the emotion that tells us what to do. And so once we realize that we are emotional and not rational, the way that we look at each other as human beings becomes completely different. Instead of looking at somebody who's being emotional and saying, oh, you're just irrational, don't be a drama queen. Wow. We can say, oh, you're just having an emotional moment. And so let me just respond to that emotional part of you that is activated right now. And it allows you to be compassionate and understanding in ways that were impossible when you looked at people and just looked at them cluelessly and say, what's your problem, dude? Come on, get it together. You're just being irrational. Completely, just that one shift, 98% emotional, 2% rational, transforms everything. How you deal with your children, how you deal with your partner, how you deal with your coworkers, your friends, family, everything. It all shifts. Yes. So that's the first big transformation.
And that's what I love about the book, is that you can take all of these skills that you teach us in any situation, whether it's at home, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's at work, I mean, everywhere.
That's right. It's foundational. This is a foundational life skill.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The second one, yes. The second one was emotional invalidation, which is huge.
This is a big one. So because Western culture has taught us that emotions are bad, we have, for generations, I'm going to say hundreds of years, we tend to invalidate the emotions of people around us. So for example, Agnes, have you ever been in this situation? Well, let's just go back, way back in the past. I mean, I don't want to trigger you because you mentioned that you had some trauma in childhood, but so let me talk about myself. That'd probably be safer.
I'll welcome it.
No, it's okay. When I was 2 years old, I go outside and I run around and I fall down and I skin my knee, and I'm a little boy and I start to cry. What am I told? Don't cry. Don't be a sissy. Man up. Real men don't cry. It doesn't hurt. Oh, it'll go away soon. How many of those kinds of comments have been made to you over your life?
Wow.
Thousands. Yeah. Thousands, tens of thousands of times. And how many times have you used those statements against somebody else?
That's true.
A lot. It's called emotional invalidation. It's what I call the first deadly sin. Oh. It's insidious, it's pervasive, and it's intensely abusive. And it's particularly abusive on children. And yet we do it all the time. There's just thousands of research articles out there that talk about the deleterious effects of emotional invalidation on the human brain. Wow. And I don't know if you're familiar with the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study out of San Diego, California, which shows, it documents empirically the effect of emotional abuse on later medical outcomes in life. And people who are emotionally abused, they go through these adverse childhood experiences and 10 times more likely to die of cancer, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, all these morbidity problems, all because of emotional abuse. So the transformation is to move from reacting to somebody else's emotional experience by invalidating it to instead validating their emotional experience and soothing your own anxiety. Because one of the reasons the primary reason we emotionally invalidate is because another person's upset causes us to be anxious. And when we emotionally invalidate them, our brain is unconsciously saying, stop being emotional so I can stop being anxious.
Interesting.
And so we have to learn how to manage our own anxiety without emotionally invalidating somebody else. And we do that by learning how to validate emotions. My sense is, and my experience is, that people invalidate because they're emotionally incompetent, and they're trying to find a way to soothe their own anxiety. So they emotionally invalidate the upset child or the upset person, adult.
Okay.
And it's all about soothing anxiety. And once you learn how to validate emotions, then all of a sudden you don't have to invalidate anymore, and you don't become anxious anymore. You're not anxious around emotional people. You're quite calm around them.
Yeah.
So that's the second transformation.
It is. But I also want to say there was something that was different, and I don't know if we can speak on it in regards to when you're trying to invalidate someone, the you versus I statement.
Oh yeah, let me talk about that.
Can that apply in this situation?
Yes.
When you're okay?
Yes. So let me give you a quick history. Carl Rogers was a mid-20th century humanist psychologist. He was not much of a theorist. He was more of a clinician, and he was teaching people positive regard. If you have a positive regard for the other, unconditional positive regard for the other, that's how you get clinical results in psychotherapy. And he was not big on listening. I mean, it turns out that's what he was doing, but he was really focused on the attitude that you have towards your patient is what makes the difference in psychotherapy. And he wrote a whole bunch of beautiful books about all of this stuff. Well, one of his students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison was a guy by the name of Thomas Gordon. Gordon was the guy that invented the term active listening. But Gordon made a huge mistake. He looked around the world and watched how people used you statements, saying, you're bad, you've got to stop doing that, where the you was used as an accusation. And he concluded that using you statements was really destructive. And so he began to teach people only use I statements. What I hear you saying is X. Yeah. And so this became embedded in pop psychology in our culture. And every active listening class around today still teaches the use of I statements. But the fact of the matter is, and we all know this from experience, that when somebody uses an I statement on us to try to calm us down, all we do is get more pissed off. Well, the next step was 20 years later, another psychologist, again, out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Marshall Rosenberg, studied there. And it's unclear whether he knew of Gordon. It's unclear what he did, but he developed this thing called nonviolent communication, or now it's called compassionate communication. It looks to me, based on my research and of the history, is that he stole it. I'll just be very frank. He just rebranded Gordon's I statements into nonviolent communication, added a little twist, rebranded it, and built a huge thing out of nonviolent communication. But the problem, and I've taken nonviolent communication courses as well as active listening courses. In my early days as a peacemaker, I needed tools that really worked. And I will tell you that neither I statements nor nonviolent communication ever work in intensely emotional situations. Not only do they not work, they make things worse. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I began to teach. I started using you statements, and I got immediate, powerful results when I was de-escalating people with the you statement. So I came up with 4 rules, and this is beyond the book. I didn't even put this in the book. 4 rules. 1, never use an I statement when you're trying to empathize with someone or calm them down. You would never say something like, oh, what I see you're feeling is shame, or what I see you're feeling is grief or sadness.
Oh my God.
You would never say that. Never, never, never. What you would say instead is, oh, you're really sad. You're in a lot of grief. You have a lot of shame. You're feeling a lot of shame. You feel the difference between the two?
Yes.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Only use a you statement when you're reflecting back somebody's emotions. Never use a you statement for anything else. Only when you're reflecting back their emotions. Or you can paraphrase too. Oh, what you said was, that's okay too. Okay. Use I statements to assert your own feelings. I'm really angry. I'm really sad. I feel a lot of grief. So use an I statement to assert your stuff. Do not use an I statement to try to empathize with, or reflect back what another person's experience is. And never use a you statement to blame somebody else for the way you feel. You make me feel angry. Never do that. Never do that. That was Gordon's big problem. But Gordon never figured out the differences between I's and U's. And partly he didn't have neuroscience. That we have neuroscience today that shows us what's going on in the brain. And he didn't have the advantage of that. The problem is that they got picked up in the human potential movement in the 1960s, and everybody said, oh, this is a new cool thing. And then Rosenberg did this whole big thing around nonviolent communication, and it just got embedded into our psyches. And every time I teach the workshop, I say, don't use I statements. And some people take deep umbrage at that. They're just offended by it. And I just have to.
And I use it all the time. And then when I was reading the book, I'm like, oh my God, I have to shift everything.
That's right.
Because.
That's right.
Yes.
And all I ask people to do is just do a simple test. Get a friend and have your friend tell you a story with some emotions in it, and reflect back what the person said and felt. Just really what they felt. Forget what they said. What did they feel? What were their emotions? And use an I statement. Oh, what I hear you saying is that you're really angry or sad or don't feel listened to or whatever. And then have them tell the story again and use a you statement. You're really angry. You're pissed off. You're really sad. You don't feel appreciated or supported. Straight you statement. No, as direct as you can possibly make it. And then ask your friend which way felt better. And the friend will always tell you the you statement made me feel better. Without exception.
Yes.
Here's what's going on in the brain. When you use an I statement, the moment the speaker hears the I, the speaker no longer feels heard and turns off. The brain turns off. The speaker's brain turns off. As long as you use you're literally lending your prefrontal cortex to the speaker, and you're helping the speaker process through the emotional experience. Use an I statement.
You've lost them. Yeah.
You lose them. The brains turn off.
So the third transformation is the
affect labeling. Mm-hmm.
Affect labeling.
Right. So there are 4 levels of reflective listening, and it's mirroring, paraphrasing, core messaging, and affect labeling. Most people learn mirroring and paraphrasing in active listening using I statements, which don't work. Mirroring is where you repeat what the person says word for word. Mirroring is very powerful when it's used appropriately. The only time you would use mirroring is when you need to be on the same page with somebody else about a rule or a procedure or a list or a recipe or something like that. So I would say, Agnes, I need you to go to the store and I want you to pick up some tortillas and some tomatoes and some cheese and some refried beans and some ground beef, because we're going to make tacos tonight. And then I would say, so what do I want you to get at the store?
Oh, you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
You said the refried beans, the tomatoes. When you started announcing
it's hard, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So mirroring is really hard because we have a very limited short-term capacity to memory. And so remembering what people say is really difficult. But if I said again, now listen carefully, Agnes, this is what I need you to get at the store. And if you need to write it down, that's okay. But I'm going to want you to repeat back exactly what I want you to get me at the store so that we're on the same page about what we need to make these tacos. So I need you to get me some tortillas, some refried beans, some tomatoes, some grated cheese, and some ground beef.
Okay. Tortillas, refried beans, tomatoes, grated cheese. Oh, man. Ground beef.
There you go. So what you said, now to make sure the cycle's complete, I said, great, Agnes. What you said to me was that you're going to go to the store and you're going to get tortillas, tomatoes, refried beans, grated cheese, and hamburger. That's exactly right. You got any questions? And now you've got it deeply embedded in your head what you're going to get, and you didn't even have to write it down. That's when we use mirroring.
Love it.
That's the only time we use mirroring. In situations like that. I'm a pilot. So we'll use mirroring between air traffic control and myself as the pilot. The air traffic control will give me a clearance, and I have to mirror back that clearance word for word. Because at 8,000 feet, 200 miles an hour, crushed aluminum is really a bad thing.
Right.
And so we want to make sure we're all on the same page. So the second level of reflective listening is paraphrasing, which is what most people learn. Basically, I just take your words and reframe them in my own words. The third level of reflective listening is core messaging. And have you ever been around somebody who just kind of goes on and on and on? They're like a rabbit running around and you don't know where they're going or what they're trying to say. That's when you use core messaging. And what you're trying to do in core messaging is not pay attention to the words, but try to figure out what is the meaning of what this person is trying to say.
Wow.
And then you give back the meaning with a metaphor if you can. And then the last level and the deepest level of reflective listening is affect labeling. And notice how as we move through these levels, we get away from the words. So mirroring is word for word. Paraphrasing is changing the words. Core meaning is kind of not listening to the words, but getting the meaning. Affect labeling, we completely ignore the words. We don't listen to the words one bit. We completely ignore what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
And we read their emotions, and then we reflect back their emotions with a simple you statement. You are angry. So it's a completely different level of reflective listening. And neuroscience shows that when you engage in affect labeling somebody else's emotions, that the emotional centers of the brain are inhibited while the prefrontal cortex is activated. It immediately calms down the brain, the emotional brain, in about 30 seconds. These are all studies done by Matthew Lieberman, a neuroscientist at UCLA. And he did all the brain scanning studies that show exactly the mechanisms in the brain, why this is so powerful, and why it works every time without fail.
Wow.
So the third transformation is learning how to listen to and reflect emotions. We call that affect labeling.
Okay. Affect labeling. The fourth transformation.
Affect labeling, I think that's next, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you calm yourself down? Now you know how to calm somebody else down because you label their emotions. The next transformation that will occur is that you'll start labeling your own emotions. And this develops self-awareness of your own emotions. And why this is important is because the way our brains are constructed is that the thinking part of our brain is not well connected to the emotional side of our brain. They're connected basically through a piece of the brain called the medial prefrontal cortex. However, the emotional side of the brain is very, very powerful, and it can dominate the prefrontal cortex in highly emotional situations such that the prefrontal cortex no longer functions. It's a literal shutdown. It's what Goldman used to call the amygdala hijack. When you affect label yourself, you have the same effect on your own brain that you have when you label somebody else's emotions. So you would say something like, you could say this to yourself, I'm really angry. I'm really frustrated. I feel completely overwhelmed. I don't feel appreciated. Nobody's listening to me. I feel shame. I feel really sad. I feel completely alone, abandoned, and unloved. And so as you label your own emotions, literally, you're calming yourself down. And the effect of this transformation is to make you emotionally self-aware, which is one of the key components of emotional competency. When you become emotionally self-aware, all kinds of good things happen to you. Most people are not emotionally aware because they've been taught since childhood that emotions are bad. So they tend to repress their emotions, and all kinds of bad things happen when you repress your emotions. So that's the fourth transformation. And the fifth transformation is the most amazing of all. And
letting go of ego.
This is a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I have a strong spiritual practice. I didn't even know that this was going to happen until it started to happen. Then I said, oh, look, this is amazing. And I started just being aware of it. What happens when you affect label somebody, when you reflect back their emotions, is that your ego drops away. You enter into the present moment. You're not thinking about the future or the past. Eckhart Tolle writes about this, right? It talks about the power of the presence of now. You actually experience that moment where your ego drops away and you feel a oneness with the universe and with the people the person you're listening to. And it's an effect that lasts for about 20 to 30 seconds, as long as you're affect labeling. But then what happens is that over a period of time of practicing this, you've had this experience of being one and being egoless, and your own ego needs start to evaporate. They just start to slowly dissolve. It doesn't happen overnight, but with practice, with this kind of listening, eventually you get to a place where those ego demands and for example, a lot of people will experience chattering voices, that little negative voice in there that's always, the chatterbox is always telling you can't do that, you're an idiot, oh, you're just a complete screw up, you're totally worthless and a pile of dung, right? That little voice, that's part of that system. When you affect label somebody else and you begin to affect label yourself, with practice, that voice completely goes away. I used to have it. I don't have it at all anymore. Gone. And my students report that it goes away. That chattering voice goes away. And you no longer suffer from that negativity that is pounding at you constantly during consciousness. You just sit in this place of perfect calm and peace. Sure, I get frustrated. Might even get a little bit angry every now and then, but it's like a little puff of smoke and then it's gone. That's the fifth transformation. Yes. Pretty powerful stuff.
Oh my God. Amazing work. Amazing work. I mean, we can talk about the book and break it down. What I like about it is that there's another section in the book that you actually go deeper in those terms. But there was one term that I've never heard before. And I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly.
Alexithemia?
Yes.
Yeah, it gets everybody. So alexithemia is a condition where you are unable to identify and name your own emotions. And you will see alexithemia if you look at the DSM-5 Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses. You will see alexithemia, a condition of alexithemia. Some people on the autistic spectrum will have some alexithemia. Sometimes people who have psychopathy or sociopathy will have alexithemia. Any kind of brain disorder where people do not have the ability to understand or recognize or be aware of their emotions is called alexithemia. Now, and it's a Greek word. It means Alexa, no, word, themia, feel. Can't feel my words. And what I've discovered as a peacemaker and mediator is that when people are in intense conflict, they become alexithemic. Now, it's short term, it's acute, but they are no longer able to feel their emotions. They are just in total reactive rage for the most part. And that's because their prefrontal cortex is shut down. They can no longer access the cognitive structures that they built up that associate emotions with affect. Affect is the feeling of pleasantness and unpleasantness we have. Emotions are the symbolic and cognitive representations of that affect that allow us to bring these feelings into our consciousness. And when in conflict, when people are in this deep affective state, their prefrontal cortex is completely shut down. You can't reason with them. You can't do anything with them. But when you affect label them, you're literally lending your prefrontal cortex to them so that they can reconstruct their emotional database and move from alexithemia to self-awareness. Wow. And it happens every single time. The brain's hardwired for this. It's amazing to watch, very powerful. One of the problems that, as I teach this, both, in workshops and online and as a graduate professor, is that I can get deep into the neuroscience and we can get into neurophysiology and people's eyes just glaze over. So I've got to give enough science so that people get that this isn't BS pop psychology based on really wrong ideas such as Freudian ideas or Jungian ideas or stuff coming out of the 20th century that just was wrong. It's based on science, hard science, empirical science, not on myth. And so I got to give enough science to give the ideas credibility, to show people, but that also can make it a little bit more difficult for people to read. And the other thing is we want to explain what we've observed, all of us as human beings have observed time and time again, and put explanatory words and concepts around it. So alexithemia is a big word, but it describes something that we've seen all the time. I'm so mad I want to put my fist through the wall. Yeah. Or all I can do is just put my fist through the wall. Right. All right, that's alexithemia. The inability to express, to understand, recognize, be self-aware, and express your own emotions. So what happens is when somebody is in that state, the only way they can react is physically. So that's where domestic violence comes from. That's where crime comes from. And people putting their fists through the walls. That's where all that comes from. It's essentially emotional incompetency.
So Doug, if someone's listening and this stands out to them, right? They're dealing with a teenager or someone in their life that don't know how to express their feelings. What tools or advice can you give to someone that's dealing with an individual that falls under that category?
Right. You have to get educated about this. Yeah. There's no way in the 1 hour conversation that we're having that anybody can learn these skills. They're simple to describe, but they're not so simple to implement. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability in the beginning until you start doing it, and then it becomes self-reinforcing. So I would recommend that people, if what we're talking about is resonating, that they first go to my website, DougNoll, DougNoll.com, and check out all the blogs I've got there, and also links to my book and links to my online workshops. And the other thing that people can do is go to my YouTube channel, Douglas Noll, and there are about 30 YouTube videos up there, obviously free, where I discuss a lot of this stuff. And if it's really resonating, then think about signing up for a course or signing up for one of my coaching programs and just learning how to do this. It takes about 6 weeks. What I learned, I wrote the book and I got a huge positive feedback about the book, but then there were some people could apply the principles of the book right away. They got it, but other people couldn't. So then I put on an online workshop or a videotape where we actually show you how to do it with demonstrations and all this stuff. Some people got that. And then I would do live workshops, and some people would do that. But most of the time, by the time people were either done with the online workshop or walked away from a live workshop, the following Monday, they forgot everything. So what I learned was that it takes about 6 weeks of follow-up, an hour a week, with support and coaching to really embed these skills deeply. Most people can do it in 6 weeks. I've had some people it's taken a year and a half, but it's always different, and it depends upon your upbringing and a whole bunch of stuff, but everybody gets it. I've never, ever not had a student get this stuff. So if it's really resonating with you, you really need to check out all the different levels of coaching and training and education you can get, and commit yourself to a process of learning, because this is counter-normative. It is exactly the opposite of everything we've been taught about emotions. It goes directly against teachings of Western culture, and it goes directly against the teachings of normative conversation. For those reasons, not because it's difficult to do, but because it's counter-normative. It appears to violate all the rules that we've ever learned about how to listen and communicate with people. It takes a little getting used to. You have to really reprogram yourself. But if you do, the payoff is huge. I mean, mind-bogglingly huge. And it's not that difficult to shift. You just have to be willing to put in the time and effort.
Oh my God, thank you so much for writing this book. It's amazing. It's an amazing book. And
well, thank you.
I mean, I've highlighted it. I have notes. But before I let you go, how can we deal with our current situation? Like there's so many things going on in 2020 with COVID, with, the elections and everything else. We're in this like fight and flight mode.
Very stressful.
Yes, very
Anxiety
stressful.
producing.
Anxiety and everything.
And everybody's experiencing it.
Right. What can you tell us on how to cope? What's the best way to cope?
Listen other people into existence. Doesn't matter what they believe. You can violently disagree with the political position of somebody else. Listen to them. Listen to their emotions. Validate their emotions. Doesn't mean you agree with them, but get people to feel heard. Why are protesters out on the street for Black Lives Matters, most of which are peaceful, of course? Why is there some violence? Why are people on the far right walking into state capitals with AK-47s, brandishing weapons? One very simple reason. They don't feel heard at a deep emotional level. And the politicians, I'm sad to say, instigate this tribalism in order to aggregate power unto themselves. And the only way we, the people of the United States of America, can stop that kind of abuse of power, both on the left and the right, is to listen to each other. We don't have to agree with each other. All we have to do is listen and validate each of our emotional experiences. Mm. And if we all made it a point of listening each other into existence, a lot of this stuff would go away. I'm not going to say all of it would, but a lot of it. And we would be finding that we would be looking for leaders who are a little bit more enlightened than the choices we have in front of us.
So what is one thing you would like to see readers walk away after reading De-Escalate?
I suppose that the one thing that I really want people to get, if they don't get anything else, is that we are emotional beings. We're not rational beings. Don't apply rationality to human behavior. Don't make the assumption that human nature is based on rationality. It's not. And if you can make that shift, then a lot of other things will fall into place that have probably been very confusing and chaotic to you in the past. That's the most important point.
Is there anything else you would like to add or discuss that perhaps we didn't touch on today?
I'll just say this, that since writing the book and coming at the problem of emotions from the perspective of a peacemaker dealing with highly intense emotional situations and intractable conflicts, I've come to realize that the ability to de-escalate and listen is good. But what's even more important is learning how to be emotionally competent. We don't spend any time in our educational system teaching kids how to be emotionally competent. We do all task-focused stuff. And I think today we're seeing the introduction of socio-emotional learning, but school systems are completely botching it because the people that they're hiring to train, the consultants, are all rational-based people, and they're coming at emotions from a rational perspective. And they're not properly schooled in neuroscience and understanding where emotions are coming from. And as long as you have professors teaching teachers based on rationality and the Western empiricism and not based on the fact that we are emotional beings, not rational beings, then we're going to continue to have problems. We can empty our prisons in 25 years if we teach our kids how to be emotionally competent starting at about 2 years old. We might have a few. There are always going to be a few, very small percentage of people who are dangerous to themselves and to society, who need to be put away. I mean, they need to be isolated. But the rest of it, drug addiction, all that stuff, that's all based on emotional abuse. We start teaching kids, it all goes away.
Yeah. Doug, have you thought of implementing or extending this program, what you've done with President of Peace, and maybe have it where teachers?
Yeah, I've tried.
Oh, so what happened? So no.
I taught for about 8 months as an experimental program. I taught at a high school and all the feeder middle schools. I taught all the faculties.
Yeah.
How to. We got amazing results, phenomenal results, just exactly what I expected. And then the school district never called me back and said, we want to do more. They're so overwhelmed. These school districts are so overwhelmed. The idea of bringing one more program from a kind of an unknown guy, lawyer turned peacemaker, even though I've got multiple graduate degrees and my credibility is pretty strong, they're just overwhelmed and they're not motivated enough to change to a system that's counter-normative to what they understand, which is the rational being principle of education. Very difficult for them. Same thing in law enforcement. I've approached law enforcement.
Oh my God,
I've done training in law enforcement. They're just not interested. They're interested in use of force because that's all they know and that's what they feel safe with. And the idea of learning how to use the brain to calm somebody down is so counterintuitive to them that they just can't get their heads around it. The way that I tell people to approach this is if you can learn the skills, either learn them from me or self-study and get them yourself. Get some community discussion groups going. Put together a group of people that can even meet on Zoom once a week and just share your experiences, listing other people into existence. And if you can get people from all aspects of your community there in Mesa, so maybe you get some people in government, law enforcement, education, and they don't even have to be high-end people. They just have to have people who want to change and grow. They will be pebbles in the pond. They'll drop pebbles in the pond, and those rings will flow out. And in a period of, over a period of time, a year or two, you'll be amazed at how people will start hearing about this and seeing it. Because when you learn these skills and you start modeling them, other people are going to start imitating you. So what's going on here? What are you doing? We see this. This is what happens in the prisons. We'll teach a cadre of 15 inmates these skills in a yard. And within a year, there's very little violence in that yard. Everything's changed. Because those 15 inmates and everybody they teach are now behaving in a completely different way. Because it's powerful, it works.
Absolutely.
And they don't like violence. The only reason violence is in prison is because that's the only style of communication they've ever learned. But when they learn something different that's even more powerful than violence, they use it.
Right.
But they have to see it, they have to do it, and other people have to see them doing it.
Well, amazing work.
Spread the word. That's all it is. Because once people understand this and start doing it, their lives change forever. Right. They're so happy. They're so grateful. And so it's a big sell in the beginning, but once people start doing it, it's really easy. And then it spreads.
So I know you mentioned this before, but how can listeners contact you if they would like to work with you? What's the best way?
So my email address is really simple, Doug, D-O-U-G, at dougnoll.com, DOUGNOL.com. You can either email directly or you can go to my website, dougnoll.com. I'm all over social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and you can Google. If you Google me, I think I got 20 or 30 Google pages out there on me in one way or another. So I'm really easy to find, and I'm very accessible. I don't have a big organization. What you hear is what you got. I don't have a staff of 10,000. It's just me. And I tend, at least for now, I answer all my own emails and respond to people. And there are just a whole bunch of different ways that you can get into this at very low cost, or if you really want serious coaching, pay a little more money, because my time is valuable too. So, but there are lots of different options. And if people resonate with what they're hearing, then I just invite you to visit dougnoll.com and start your exploration, and then reach out to me when you feel that it's appropriate.
Yes, and buy the book.
Buy the book.
It's available on your website?
It is available on my website. And of course, if you buy it on my website, you're not going to pay any more than you would buy if you had an Amazon Prime membership. But you also will be offered the additional resources. You can buy additional resources, a master workbook, and online training, and also coaching. So there are various upsells depending upon what you're interested in. And if don't want to go through that whole process, then just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any of the usual places, and you can get the book.
Okay, well, thank you. I learned so much.
Well, thank you, Agnes. And thanks for spreading the word and helping spread the word. This is my life's work, and it's really important to me that as many people as possible learn about this, so that we can get people starting to listen to others into existence.
Thank you for listening. Please visit the website at www.leveluptribes.com. And please subscribe to the podcast and share with your family and friends. Be sure to tune in to our next episode. Catch you all next time, my beloved tribes.